I'd be happy to. Again, my name is Andrew Sperling, and I work at Nami, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We're the nation's largest organization representing and advocating on behalf of people living with severe and persistent mental illness and their families, disorders such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depression. These are very serious conditions that have enormous public health burden associated with them. We have good treatments, for example, for schizophrenia, but they're far from perfect. We don't have a disease-modifying breakthrough medication available. The tools we have now, the clinical tools, in particular atypical antipsychotic medications, they're effective at helping patients control their symptoms and function at a higher level, but they're likely to live with the disorder this serious for the rest of their lives and take these medications over a long period of time. As again, I mentioned, they can be very helpful, but they have severe side effects associated with them. Each of these medications, and I can give you some examples of them. There's Abilify, there's Risperdal, there's Zyprexa, a large number of them that are available. Each of them has a different mechanism of action in the brain, and each of them has a different side effect profile, and each of them have a very different label as approved by the Food and Drug Administration. And so what we know is they're not interchangeable. And the reason we know this is we actually had a government-funded study called CATIE, C-A-T-I-E, which was funded by the National Institute of Mental Health, and they compared a number of these atypical antipsychotic medications with one of the older ones. And what they used for efficacy was, as a proxy for efficacy, was the switch rate, the rate at which patients needed to switch this medication for whatever reason, if it wasn't working for them, if they had an episode of psychosis, or other type of problem. These were tested in patients. The subjects in this study all had schizophrenia. And what we found at the end of the trial was that 69% of the subjects enrolled in that trial had to switch a medication at least once, and 50%, half, had to switch at least twice. So this led to the conclusion that Nami took away from this study, and that is these drugs simply aren't clinically interchangeable the way some other therapeutic classes might be. So when we talk about step therapy, it's very dangerous in this particular therapeutic class of medications. What we know is that step therapy is based on a presumption of clinical failure. You have to fail on one compound before you can get access to a different compound. Well, that failure is very serious for patients living with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and other serious mental illnesses, because once you have an acute episode, because the treatment that that the insurance company preferred, that insisted you try first, fails, you actually oftentimes never rebound back to that level that you were at. We also know that these medications take a long time to take effect, and you often, when you're switching, you have to titrate down one medication and titrate up the other, and that can be a process that can take as long as 5 or 6 or 7 weeks. So randomly switching people and requiring step therapy is very dangerous with this particular therapeutic class. And on an individual basis, I can tell you, I meet patients every day working at Nami where they have to go through these processes of step therapy, and I would add that it's disproportionately there in the Medicaid program. And many states use step therapy aggressively in their Medicaid program, and that is of concern to Nami, because these are often the sickest patients. They're on public benefits and they're on the Medicaid program, and we shouldn't be using or imposing step therapy as a means of closing a gap in the governor's budget, because this is very dangerous for their ongoing therapy, and Nami believes it's deleterious toward their health. So Nami feels strongly that we need to work on policies at the state level, and we heard what was done in Maryland and some other states. This has been done as well, to place some constraints and some parameters around step therapy to make sure that it doesn't hinder the progress that patients make and impact negatively on the quality of care that people get, particularly in a program like Medicaid, where we're dealing with the most vulnerable in our society. So with that, let me stop.
Yeah, I think your point on Medicaid is a really good one. And the other issue is those Medicaid patients are in the worst position to fight and appeal one of these decisions. And if they aren't lucky enough to have a good doctor like the two we have on this panel, it's really hard for them to get that situation overturned.
That's absolutely correct. In some cases, in public sector psychiatry, you have some community psychiatrist at a community mental health center. they are literally only have 8 to 10 minutes with a patient once a month to review their medications and review what's working and what's not. And it's very, very difficult in that circumstance to launch the appeal, to go through the bureaucracy that the insurance plan puts in place to keep patients from getting access to the medication that works best for them on an individual basis.
And Nami in Maryland was very active when we worked in the legislature to pass the legislation. They were one of the key partners, and they advocate on all kinds of issues like this, fighting for patients. One of the other organizations that was key in Maryland, being